Hey everybody. I miss you guys so much. I really do. I wish we were all together right now, but we're not. So it's very, very cool of SAS to put this together. I'm going to do a talk called Sweeter Self-Talk, which is questions we can ask ourselves to put a halt to rampant bad feelings, shifting us to a place of clarity and action. Let's make sure this works. Boom. There we go. Okay. So if you title something Sweeter Self-Talk, it kind of lends itself to the question, sweeter than what? And what I mean by that is sweeter than whatever voices you probably have bouncing around in your brain right now and all the time. I'm sure you guys have heard the phrase, if you heard someone talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself, you'd punch them, or something like that. But that's funny for us because it's relatable. The inside of our heads is not always the kindest environment for us to be in, and it can actually be downright hostile sometimes. But there's kind of a specific element of negative self-talk that I find really interesting, which is that it's not really talk per se. It's more like a bath of like images and feelings than it is actual language, which is how I think our brain is able to get away with being so extreme and so unrealistic with us. So, because we never really say the words like, wow, you really suck, or you're never going to be good enough, or anything to ourselves. We wouldn't actually say those sentences, but it is something we feel, and something we feel to be true, especially when it's kept up inside of our brains. And we know this. We know that this is a real phenomenon. It's why we say things like, well, now that I'm saying this out loud, it sounds ridiculous, or why we seek out sounding boards in our friends just to get our thoughts out in the air. Or even why we say things like, oh, well, I don't want to talk about it because if so, that'll like make it real. We're kind of fully aware that something really like transformational happens when we move things outside of our brains. Getting things inside out into reality is really powerful. So of course, during times of extreme stress and isolation and anxiety, like, oh, I don't know, a global pandemic, those voices, aka those sort of self-defeating feelings and those limiting beliefs, really have like a lot more room to like grow and roam sort of unchecked. So all of this is kind of important to start with and to explore, because what I'd really like to do with this time, it's probably going to be, I'm shooting for about 30 minutes. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you a series of questions you can ask yourself out loud in language when you're getting stuck in shitty feelings up in the dark cave that is our minds. So what's important about that is that means for this practice to work, you actually have to, when you ask yourself these questions that I'm going to give you, you actually have to answer out loud in language too. It doesn't have to be to anyone in particular. You can just do it out loud to yourself. I talk to myself all the time like a crazy person. Or you can write it down. That's another thing too. A lot of people find a lot of power in self-journaling. It doesn't even have to be like a journal entry, but just anything that gets it from in here where everything is intangible, and not grounded in actual language outside words, written words, spoken words, whatever it is. That's how this works. Is if you want to meet feelings with questions and curiosity, you have to get them out in the air. You can't keep them up in Plato's cave. So there's a lot of bad feelings out there that we can feel. But in 30 minutes, I probably can't touch on every single one of those hundreds of feelings. So I'm going to kind of pick 5 big ones, especially ones that are a little pandemic themed, to kind of go through. So let's do a little share screen here. I'm also just learning dual screen Zoom. Here we go. Okay. So the first one I want to talk about is anxiety and worry, which is a feeling that we all feel, no matter who you are, and is a feeling that our brains are unfortunately pretty hardwired to fuel. So when you feel anxiety and worry, the questions that I find most helpful are these. What am I scared will happen? What vision do I actually have in my head? How realistic is it? Would I survive it? Would I still care about it this time next year? So the reason questions like that work is, so worrying is kind of an interesting phenomenon, right? It feels like we're doing something when we're worrying, but we're actually really not. It's more like a sort of like a distraction-based coping mechanism to avoid actually doing anything, even if all there is to do is just accept there's nothing more I can do here, which does count as doing something. So yeah, so we tend to kind of like worry about to avoid dealing with. And the first step to actually shifting to a place of just worrying about to actually dealing with is to actually look at what you're dealing with, which kind of means dealing with it out in reality, lending language to it. Because once you're sort of staring the thing right in the face and asking yourself these questions, it tends not to be all that scary. So yeah, so what am I scared will happen? What vision do I have in my head? Didn't actually write that right. That's okay. How realistic is it? Would I survive it? Would I still care about it this time next year? If you actually move through these questions and answer them out loud or on paper, you'll find whatever it is you're freaked out about probably isn't going to happen, probably wouldn't be that bad. And even if you hit the absolute worst case scenario, you probably won't care about it eventually. Okay, so the next feeling I want us to talk about, I'm going to move through these a little quickly and pretty generally. I should mention I'm available to talk if anyone wants to dig into any of these ideas a little bit deeper. I am a practicing coach now, which is extremely cool for me. So yeah, so this is going to be a little bit general, but if anyone wants to talk, let me know. The next feeling I'm going to talk about is resentment and anger. So, and I put both of these here because they're slightly different, right? They have a similar root, but a little bit of a different spice. Anger tends to be a bit more about things being done to you. Resentment tends to come from a lot more of sort of feeling trapped or feeling like you've been forced in a place that you don't want to be in. So the questions that I tend to ask when I'm faced with that is, if we're talking about more like anger, it's what values of mine are getting stepped on or stepped over, or basically not being honored by others, or where am I self-abandoning if I'm thinking about resentment, which means not honoring my own values. So this is an interesting, okay, basically why this works is when something kind of feels very, very activating to us in an excessively bothered or an angry way, it's often because there's something about it that clashes with one of the values we've chosen for ourselves, which can be a conscious exercise. You can actually write out what my values are, what I deem important, or unconsciously. I mean, we choose values all the time, even if we don't really know that's what we're doing. And the interesting thing about values is that they're incredibly important to us. They're really, really intrinsic to sort of our personhood, but we all have different ones, and none of them are inherently right or wrong. Sort of another good way of saying this is values isn't the same as morality or even principles. It's they're personal choices, and we need to be able to feel like we're honoring our values either both outside in the world and inside of ourselves to feel any sense of basically fulfillment. But yeah, that can cause issues, right? Someone with a value of like independence or self-expression might clash with someone who has a value of harmony or contribution because they require different actions and different priorities. So when we feel like either we're not in line with our values or the outside world is, it's a sense of dissonance, as opposed to if everything's in line, it's a sense of resonance. And so what's kind of interesting is, well, sad, unfortunately, because human beings are quite flexible and they're quite resilient, we can actually absorb quite a tremendous amount of discord and sort of keep functioning and keep going. But there's a price to pay to it, right? Which is sort of this persistent feeling we're talking about of anger and resentment. It's almost more that it's somewhere between like toleration and betrayal if we're living in a world that we don't feel is in line with our values. So anyway, if you feel yourself feeling excessively bothered and you don't know why, or something's making you angrier than you think maybe it should, it's probably worth it to do a little value identification exercise with yourself. Ask yourself these questions. You'll probably feel less crazy and more human, and frankly, probably a lot more capable of communicating your needs to yourself or to whoever it is you're talking to. So, one more time. What values of mine are getting stepped on or stepped over? Where am I self-abandoning? Are the questions I suggest you ask out loud or on paper. Okay, so now looking at stress and overwhelm, which again, universal bad feelings. So with this one, the angle I'm kind of taking is not so much, I'm not really so focused on like what it is that's going to stress you out and what the best way to like project manage it is, but more like the experience of stress itself. Something that's really, it's actually essentially true of all emotions, but really especially stress, is that it lives in your body. Stress and overwhelm are really physical experiences. You know, tightness in the chest, so maybe a sore posture, upset stomach, fast heartbeat. These are the signals your body uses to tell itself that it's stressed out. So the questions I like to use in this instance are, how do I know I'm stressed? What does it feel like? And then what does my body need right now? And why that works. That works because, like I said, stress lives here. So even just the practice of identifying like how you know you're stressed, like literally like, oh, I literally feel that my chest is tight, or I feel like I'm hunched, or I have a stomach ache or something like that. Taking the sort of amalgamous feeling of overwhelm and grounding it somewhere in your body where it actually lives kind of turns it into like a recognizable and tangible sensation. Which immediately, just by the practice of doing that, does make it feel less all-consuming. It makes it something that we can actually point to and understand. And then when you ask the question, what does my body need? The answer sometimes is very simple. It could be as simple as like, oh wow, I really need to like stretch out my back, or I haven't really exhaled all day today, not really. So I need a couple of deep breaths. Or it could be a check-in like, oh God, like I need better sleep than what I've been getting. I am very tired. So all that is to say, it's not a cure-all for all forms of stress and overwhelm. It's more something you can do to kind of quell the immediate physical flooding of the sensation, so that you actually have a clear mind to deal with whatever the thing is that's stressing you out. So one more time. How do I know I'm stressed? I'm stressed out. What am I actually feeling that I know that that's what's going on? What does this feel like and where is it? And then what does my body need right now? Okay, so next feeling. Okay, confusion and indecision. Again, universal bad feelings, especially when we are trapped in tiny cages like our own homes in the middle of a global pandemic, when we're not really sure what the right thing is to do. So for this one, I'm actually going to kind of give you a bunch of questions, but they're all in very much the same theme, as you'll see. So when I'm stuck in that place, the questions I like to ask are some variation of, what's most important here? What place am I making this choice from? What would each choice, oh, I didn't put the word mean. What would each choice mean to me or about me? What does my intuition say? And then if those don't help, then I move on to what's still not clear, or what do I need in order to make a choice. So why does this work? It's a concept I really actually like, called bottom lining. So for most of us, indecision feels kind of like a cloud of like internal chatter. Most of it pretty useless, actually. And it's really paralyzing, right? It's literally feels like a bunch of noise in our head. And again, because we're not using actual words or actual language, it's more just like a swirl of feelings. Oh, what if, and this and that, and mostly just visions. You know, we're seeing, you know, we're taking things from the past and sticking it in the future predictions, and it, like I said, it's paralyzing. Is probably the best word I could say for it. And what's annoying about it is when you feel frozen or paralyzed or really cloudy and hazy, it kind of tends to obscure realistically what the one or two factors are that at the end of the day are really what you should be building a choice around. I mean, we love to make pros and cons lists all day, but at the end of the day, we kind of know that there's only a handful of things that actually make our choices for us. So bottom lining questions like this kind of cut through to all that brain noise to like the heart of the issue. I'm gonna put them back up. So yeah, so if you ask something like, what's most important here, or what's most important to me, it cuts through to say, what is the thing that needs to be prioritized top? Or what place am I making this choice from? That's a good question, because you might recognize like, wow, I'm really making this, you know, the way I'm leaning right now is a place of anxiety, not power, or not joy. Maybe I'm being, you know, discomfort avoiding more than pleasure seeking in the way I'm thinking right now. What would each choice mean? The word is mean to me or about me. I like to use that one because it sort of gets you in a little bit of a powerful future self mindset, where it's like, if I choose X, Y, and Z, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? What am I telling myself if that's the choice I make? And what's my intuition say is just a great way of closing your eyes and really looking at what your gut instinct is telling you, which you don't have to go with, but it's a valuable voice that we do not listen to very often. And if all that fails and there's no bottom line to be had, then taking a step back and saying, what's still not clear, or what do I need in order to make a choice, kind of takes the anxiety and the pressure and the onus off of yourself. It's like, oh God, I have to pick. Why can't I just think clearly? Going, okay, well, truly, why can't I? What would make me feel more capable to make a choice here? Do I need to talk to someone? Do I need research? What is it I need? So taking that step back to put yourself in a better place to move forward tends to be pretty powerful. Okay, and then one more feeling we're going to go through. Right on time, thank goodness. Guilt and shame, a big one, a deep one for all of us. And again, guilt and shame are related. They're similar, but they've got a little bit of a different spice to it. I've heard it said different ways, that guilt is when you hold a bad feeling over something like you did that you've decided. Shame's when society says something. Brene Brown's got a wonderful little explanation of guilt versus shame. There's sort of a lot of twists on it, but they do kind of come from sort of the same root cause. And whenever I'm dealing with, especially if it's like a vague or misplaced sense of guilt and shame, the questions I really like to start with is, whose voice am I listening to? Is it valid? And do I agree? And the reason why this works, if you ever heard the phrase "stop shoulding on yourself," it's kind of one of my favorites. Should is a great word to look out for when it's tied in with feelings of guilt or shame, because it usually points right to the narrator of the belief. So like if you're feeling these feelings, or if you hear even the phrase inside your own brain, oh, I should, or I should blank, it's pretty helpful to follow up with, who says? It might authentically be you. It truly might. Like we talked about earlier, maybe there's a value that's really important to you that you're not honoring, in which case that's a good instinct, and recognize it and move from there. You know, take action, apologize, do whatever it is you think you have to do. But more often than not, it's probably not you. It's probably your dad or your friends or an ex, or, you know, the ghostly disembodied voice of achievement-based society or social media or whatever it is. And that doesn't actually inherently mean it's wrong. It just means that it's subject to audit, which is where asking yourself, okay, so now that I've identified what the voice is, like, or whose voice it is that's telling me I should be feeling guilt or shame. One is that a valid source? Is it coming from a voice of, you know, someone I would ask for advice, or someone whose opinion I respect? Also, is it actually an opinion they hold? You know, sometimes we hold like, oh, my dad would think X, Y, and Z, or say I should feel bad, and sometimes self-check if even that's real, or if it's just our projections onto that person or our fears. So sort of questioning the source first. Is it real? Is it a source I trust and respect? And then once you've identified that, do I agree with what it's saying? Do I genuinely agree? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But either way, you're kind of consciously owning your opinion on the matter, which is a lot of an easier place to act from. It's another good chance to sort of check your values against other values and say, even if I agree with this opinion, is it in line with my values, or is it just in line with theirs or society's? So yeah, so it's a good way to, in often cases, kind of neuter guilt and shame. And even if you decide to take it on, it's your choice to take it on and to act from. So that tends to be helpful. So one more time. Whose voice am I listening to? Is it valid? And do I agree? And that is the 5 feelings that I wanted to go over with you guys, and sort of a quick and dirty management technique for them. Yeah, I miss you all tremendously. I actually came in right 2 minutes into the way. Go me, which means I can share our love on you guys for a little while. Stas, thank you so much for putting this on. You're an angel on earth, as I've said to you many, many times. She also just had a birthday, so we should all send a lot of love to her for that. And that's it. That's it. I hope to see you guys next year. I'm sure that somewhere there's a multiverse, if you will, where we're all together, and I'm sure they're all having a great time. I'm sorry it's not this one, but yeah, I love you all. See you later.